Okay. So when I was younger, my very first love was the game of baseball. My very first love. And I loved the game of baseball when I was younger in a way that is probably impossible for me to love anything or anybody now. Like, because, you're young and you don't know how the world works, and you're not so cynical, you're not so jaded, and you can just love just freely and purely, without having had your heart broken. Anybody else but me? Okay, well, so that's a thing. And when I was a kid, I didn't quite understand how the world worked, and I was like, oh, people are on your side. That'll work out. And so that's sort of how it worked. And so when I was a kid, I fell in love with baseball. And baseball, this is before baseball, so this is going to date me, but I was born in 1984. So my very first memory of baseball was 1993. So if you just kind of think about what the game of baseball has been through over the last however many years that is, 28 years. Is that right? 28, 30 years? I don't know. Whatever it is. This is before the strike happened. Right? This is before the steroid era happened when all the records got blown up. This is before literal congressional hearings about the steroid era happened, because apparently Congress has nothing better to do than to ask Rafael Palmeiro how he hit home runs. Weird. This is before half the teams in baseball decided we're not going to try to win. Who cares? We make money anyway, so you're not going to have any reason to watch. This is before, all the sign stealing stuff that really kind of ruined 2 World Series winners the last couple of years. This is before we found out that basically every pitcher ever has been cheating for as long as has existed. Baseball's been through a lot. Right now, baseball's locked out, and I just talked for 2 minutes about how terrible baseball is, and I never even said and oh, by the way, there's a lockout. So it's before all that. Before I realized that baseball's a hard game to love. I loved baseball. I was that kid who I watched it all the time, and my favorite thing to do was go to games, and I would go in my backyard. We had a backyard, and I had this metal baseball bat, and I would have tennis balls, and I would just create these elaborate scenarios pretending like I was in the big leagues. I was a little kid. I was 19. Leave me alone. So it's not true. That's not true. I had a baseball by the time I was 19. So I absolutely I just loved baseball, and so because I love baseball, because that was it, I ended up with a secondary love, which became my one true love during the 90s, and that was collecting baseball cards. Now, if you guys have ever, if you guys remember what things were like back there, it was a visceral experience. You get the pack of cards, and it's all shiny on the outside, and it's all crinkly. It's a very satisfying feeling, and you open it, and that's a very satisfying sound, and then it smells like chemicals, probably, I don't know, but it was a really unique smell to an old to a 90s baseball card, and just the whole thing you go through, and it's treasure, maybe this pack is gonna be amazing, maybe this pack is gonna be hot garbage, you don't know, it's a mystery, oh, it just ticks every box. And so when I was a kid, every all the money that I could spend, that I had, that was kind of spending money, allowance or whatever, I put 99% of it towards buying baseball cards, and there was Donruss, there was Fleer, and there was Topps, and if I was feeling really fancy, I could pay an extra $1, and I could get Upper Deck with a little hologram on the back. It was just so cool. And so then that love gave way to yet another kind of subset of love off the love tree, and that was, I decided I wanted to collect the baseball cards of one particular player. And that one particular player was Barry Larkin. Now, Barry Larkin you guys might not know who Barry Larkin is. So let me just tell you, Barry Larkin is who Ozzie Smith wanted to be. Okay? Because that was it. Ozzie Smith's I'm the best shortstop in the world. No, he wasn't. No, that was Barry Larkin. Ozzie Smith just, Ozzie Smith's a cool guy. I'm not trying to make fun of Ozzie Smith. He didn't like Tony La Russa. I don't either, so it's good. It's all good. Anyway, so Barry Larkin was my favorite player because my favorite team was the Cincinnati Reds. They were almost always terrible, and Barry Larkin was the one who was good. And so this is how it really ended up happening. It's a very specific thing. One person online is going to think this is funny, and we just know this is a really specific reference. But in Major League Baseball All-Star games, okay, 2 things always happen. Number one, you have to have a player from every team represented on the team, which means even the terrible teams like the Reds always had to have a guy there. But then also before the game, they did my favorite thing ever. And I don't know why this is my favorite thing ever. It's still my favorite thing ever. But they would announce all the players. The players would be, like, the people would cheer for them, and the players would step forward and tip their cap. And you think that doesn't sound cool? Au contraire. To 11-year-old Drew, this is the highlight of the summer. Like, I need you guys to understand, I recorded it on VHS tapes that are still around. Like, you can't get a VCR this side of, like, I don't know, a flea market in Mississippi. But, like, I have VHS tapes that I recorded off the television of grown men tipping their cap to the crowd. I didn't record the game. I stopped after the cap tipping. So Barry Larkin made the All-Star team 12 times on his way to a Hall of Fame career. So, just throw that out there. So he's my favorite player. And I decided I need all the Barry Larkin cards. I wanted to have the world's biggest collection of Barry Larkin cards. I didn't get there, but in my house, I have over 300 some Barry Larkin cards. I put in some work, guys. All right. So all of that leads to this. So when I was a kid, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I acquire more Barry Larkin cards? How do I get this collection rolling? Okay, like it's, getting them in packs is hard, and because there's like 700 players, and the Reds are terrible, so it's not like you just go and like buy singles at that point, and the internet doesn't exist yet, and it's the whole thing. But one day I realized I got these two older brothers, and these two older brothers, they collected baseball cards before me. And they had their binders in my haunted attic. Now, I didn't go up there to check those binders for a little bit because I have sense. You don't go in the haunted attic if you don't have to. But I was thinking about it. I'm like, man, I bet there's some Barry Larkin cards up there I don't have. I should go check. And so one day, one afternoon, it was very sunny. Made sure it was very sunny, not raining outside. Not at night either. One afternoon, sunny outside, I braved the haunted attic. And I go through both of my brothers' collections, and I find about, 5 or 6 Barry Larkin cards I don't have. See, they're older than me, and these are from earlier years. So, at that point that I had to figure out what I was going to do. And what I decided to do was steal them. That was my decision. Now, you might be thinking, well, Drew, they're your brothers. Can't you share? Like, I don't know what kind of world y'all grew up in, or like how you're raising your kids now. But like, I wore hand-me-down clothes till I was like 26. And like when my dad would bring home like Long John Silver's, it was like, okay, well, here's a whole box of, chicken and fish. It was Long John Silver's night. By the way, can we just start? Y'all don't like this, like Long John Silver's, and you need to. Or else it's going to go out of business. Could more people like this place? In Indiana, we eat it all the time. I come out here and everybody's like, that's the grossest thing ever, Drew. What are you talking about? It's delicious and nutritious. Family Long John Silver nights need to happen. We shared that. We shared food. But like, the important things in life, clothes, food, whatever. But like, when it came to like toys or video games or whatever else, like we didn't share that. Like it wasn't like, well, what's mine is yours. We're all Snyder's. No, that's Neil's, that's Grant's, that's Megan's, that's Drew's, and no one touch anything of anyone else's. That's how we kept peace, is don't touch anything that anybody else had. So here I was touching what wasn't mine. I'm like, I know what I can do. These are big binders. It's only like 5 or 6 cards. I bet I could steal these, and they wouldn't notice. And you know what? I was right. I stole them. They're in my house right now. Just right there. So I felt bad about this one day. It was Thanksgiving of like 2019 or something. Like literally like the last time I was home because of COVID stuff. The last time I got together with family. My brother was there, and I was like, man, Grant, so I stole those cards from you. I'm so sorry. And he looked at me and he's like, "What are you talking about? It's 2019. That was 24 years ago. You're an adult now. Stop it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But he did tell me very helpfully. He's like, "You do realize I never cared. You could have asked, and I would have given those to you." I was like, "Oh." I mean, I don't know that I believe you exactly. Because this one time I tried to play with his pocket knife, and I cut myself, and then I had to lie to my parents and say that I cut it on there was like this piece of metal on on a clothes hamper, and I was like, "That's where I got this 3-inch gash from." And my dad's like, "That doesn't sound right," and I was like, "No, I swear." And I don't know how my brother was mad about the knife, is what I'm saying. Like, he didn't like that. He didn't like it when I played with the Sega Genesis either. So I don't know that I totally believed him about the baseball cards, but he said it. He swears. And then as a funny epilogue this week, I was actually looking up those exact cards. And the funny thing about those cards is they're like basically worthless. Like, you could buy all of those cards for like the 6 cards for like $2.14 or something. Like, it was just nothing, like no amount of money. Which means the end of this story goes like this. I wanted a something. In hindsight, knowing what I know now, I could spend a very little amount of money on it. Like the amount of money you spend on like extra guac at Chipotle. I'm really hungry this morning. All the food references. I could have just asked my brother, and apparently he would have said, "Yeah, I don't care." Or I could steal. And the weird thing is, I just stole it without any thought other than like, I want that. I should steal it. I had 3 avenues to get to the same place, which is those cards in my house right now. And I chose, out of 3, 2 of them were fine and honest and righteous and just, and I chose door number 3, which was stealing, which is not righteous or just at all. And there's something to be said for that. But I'm really telling you that story because it reminds me of another story about brothers. And it reminds me of another story about how it's a story where you get to the end of that story and it was always going to be the same. Always. It was always going to be the same. Like, it was like the end was always going to be the end. And yet there's this brother who has a choice to make. He can live righteously and get to the end and have what he wants. Or he can live unrighteously, get to the end, and have what he wants. There's nothing that's in question about the ending. The only thing that's in question is how he gets there. And so to tell that story, we got to go really, really far back. So the Bible begins with 11 chapters of God trying to deal with humanity as a whole. Like, here's all these people, I'm going to try to deal with all of them. And it's 11 chapters of that really not working well. So in the 12th chapter, God's like, let's go to plan B. And plan B was taking one family and blessing that family, and then teaching that family to represent him in this world and to bless the whole world. So instead of trying to deal with everybody, we're going to deal with one family, and that family is going to do what God wants in this world. Interesting plan. It starts with one guy. You probably know him as Father Abraham. He had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. And so Abraham is chosen first. And it was all about Abraham at first. Like, it's all about Abraham, and then it stops being about Abraham because, well, as men tend to do, he died, and it can't be about Abraham anymore. So Abraham sort of passes the torch from himself to one part of his family tree, and that one part of his family tree is his son, Isaac. So now it goes from Abraham to Isaac, and now Isaac lives his life, does his whole thing, and he gets towards the end of his life, and he has to do the exact same thing because he's going to die. And he needs to hand down, pass the torch of this whole being God's people, being God's nation, being God's family, that whole thing, being the patriarch of God's people for all time, essentially. He needs to hand down to one of his sons. And as it turns out, he had 2 candidates, Jacob and Esau. Now, technically speaking, legally speaking, the guy he's supposed to hand this down to is Esau. And the reason is because, well, Esau's the firstborn. But already from the beginning of the story, we end up having some sort of gray areas. This is a story filled with gray areas in the law, which is how we end up where we're at. Esau is supposed to be the heir because Esau is the firstborn. But Jacob and Esau, as it turns out, are twins. So Jacob and Esau are born literally no time apart at all. The way the Bible tells us is that Esau comes out and Jacob is holding on to his ankle. So like the second that Esau's all the way out, Jacob is already partially out. Like it's not like, oh, well, you know, I was born 10 minutes earlier than this one. That's not the way this set of twins worked. Like they were on top of each other. In fact, the story tells us that they were struggling for position from within the womb. So yes, technically, Esau is the firstborn. Technically, Esau is the one who was supposed to be the next patriarch of the family. And that is the way Isaac wanted it to be. Isaac wanted Esau to be the one because he's playing by the rules, just following the rules. Esau's the one that came out first. He's the one that wins. The problem is, again, they're twins. And also, Rebecca, who is the mother of the two of them, had spoken to God about this whole thing. And God had said, well, I actually want Jacob. So then Rebecca decides, I'm going to want Jacob also. Technically speaking, legally speaking, it's supposed to be Esau. But it's a gray area, and also God has said, you know, it's going to be Jacob. So they live their lives with sort of this struggle, this rivalry, okay? Jacob wants desperately what Esau has. Esau doesn't so much want it desperately. He just happens to be the guy who's born when he's born, and he wants to keep it just because, well, it's his, and also because Jacob wants it, and they're brothers, and that's how that works. But Jacob wants it. Well, I don't know that it was really for good reasons either, as much as he wanted it because Esau had it and their brothers and all that. So that's when we see another gray area, another legal gray area sort of changing hands thing happen. And the story's a little weird. And the story's a little complicated, so I need to simplify it by painting some pictures, okay? So I need you guys to have a picture in your head of who these people are, and it'll really be helpful. I swear, it'll be helpful. Okay, so here's what you need to know about Esau. Esau is an outdoorsman. Esau loves to be outside. He loves to hunt. He loves to fish. He loves to just take Mother Nature and, pound it into submission and just, this is my world and I'm going to kill the elk with my bare hands. That's what Esau's going to do. Except also Esau never has bare hands because Esau, he's fuzzy. See, you see fuzzy and you think, oh, I saw a guy at the pool one time. He took off his shirt and he was very hairy. That's what you mean, right? No, I mean like circus freak in the turn of the 20th century kind of fuzzy. Like, it becomes important later. He is basically a wild animal, okay? So here's what I need you guys to think about, okay? Esau is basically a werewolf. Covered in fur, hunts wild animals outside, walks on 2 feet. Esau the werewolf. On the other hand, there's Jacob. Jacob is very delicate. He's kind of a delicate flower. Very smooth skin, very dainty. He never goes outside because, that would mess up his skin. And also, what's he going to do? Kill an animal? He can't do that. That's not who he is. He's an indoor kind of guy. If he'd lived today, he would just play video games all day. And his mom would be like, won't you go outside? He's like, no. That's Jacob. But Jacob, because he doesn't have video games, Jacob ends up having a new love in his life. He loved to cook. He loved, the flavors and spices. And, he just loved to cook. Now, we're going to go ahead and just say this. Jacob is basically Guy Fieri. Jacob Fieri. You're thinking this is silly. I promise you it's helpful. This is what happened one day. Esau the werewolf goes out to kill a bunch of animals, but he has a really terrible day. And he's very, very tired. He's very, very hot. He's supposed to be covered in fur, guys. The sun's outside. He's very hot. And he comes back home, and he is just famished. He is desperate. He's stayed out too long. He's way too hot. Everything's awful. And he comes inside, and he comes into the house, and he is just dying for some food. And there he finds his brother, Jacob Fieri, cooking the most delicious red lentil stew that anyone's ever seen. I mean, you could put this on a flip-flop. You could, I mean, this is just an incredible, incredible stew. And Esau the werewolf comes in and he says, Jacob Fieri, take me to Flavortown. And Jacob says, I will take you to Flavortown. First, you need to give me something. And Esau the werewolf's like, I don't care. Like, I'm dying. It really doesn't matter what I give you at this point. I will die of starvation. He's very dramatic. It's a very dramatic werewolf. It's a Twilight werewolf. Like, very dramatic. He's very dramatic. Like, oh, man, like this, I'm going to die if I don't get food right now. And so Jacob Fieri's like, yeah, absolutely. Give me your birthright. Make me the heir to all of this, and I will give you all the food from Flavortown you want. And Esau's like, yeah, fine, let's do it. And that's how Jacob ends up with the birthright of Esau in what it can only be described as a not really legal transaction. Like, you can't really, like, manipulate somebody to do that kind of a thing. Like, you can't, like, I don't know that, like, you could trade birthrights for food. It's a weird thing. So it's kind of like this, okay? Like, you can buy a car, and if that car doesn't have a title, it's only kind of your car. Like, you can drive it around, you can, do all sorts of stuff, but when the time comes to go get plates for that car, the DMV is going to say, where's the title? Like, it's kind of a gray area whether it's actually even your car. Sort of like that with the birthright. So Jacob knows this arrangement I just made, I'm a genius, okay? Like, I just tricked him out of it. This is awesome, but it's only sort of legal. I need to make this double legal. So, some time passes, and Isaac is very, very old. And as he gets old, he starts to go blind, which sets up our next part of the story. So, Isaac doesn't care what arrangement they made before. And before he dies, as an old blind man, he says, look, I'm going to double down on this being Esau. This is, we're going to have the patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau, as far as Isaac is concerned. And so he says, all right, he brings Isaac to him. He says, hey, listen, I need you to go and kill an animal, come back, we'll have some food, it'll be cool, and I will give you my official blessing as the patriarch of this family, as the patriarch of God's people. That's what I'm going to do. And Esau's like, awesome. I was really hungry that one day. I shouldn't have given it up, and you're saying it doesn't count. Perfect. Great. So he leaves to go do that. And Rebecca realizes what's happening, and she's like, hey, Jacob, now is your chance to do this for real. Here's what we're going to do. They cooked him some food. And then Isaac's blind, but he can feel and smell. So they took goat skin. Remember, Esau's a werewolf. I'm not kidding about that. Like, he's very fuzzy. So he takes goat skin, and he covers him in goat skin. Because that's what Esau was like. He was as hairy as a goat. And so Jacob puts goat skin on. He's got the food. He's Jacob Fieri. He's going to take Isaac to Flavortown. And he goes to his father, and he says, hey, I'm Esau. I'm here for the blessing. And Isaac's like, what? You weren't even gone. You were gone for like 10 minutes, man. How did you do that? And he's like, oh, it was God. The Lord provided to me the animal. And Isaac's like, I guess. And so Isaac pronounces his familial blessing on who he thinks is Esau. But Jacob, saying he is Esau, receives the blessing. And now, like getting the title to a car, he is legally, spiritually, officially, through his lies and manipulation and deceit, he is the guy now to lead God's people in the next generation. And of course, Isaac is not real happy about it when he finds out, but what are you going to do? It's done, it's done. And Esau comes back and he's like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to kill Jacob. And he's a werewolf. And he's the outdoorsman. He's used to killing stuff. Jacob's never killed a thing in his life. He's sat inside and been delicate his whole life. So Jacob has no choice at this point. For his big burly brother who wants to kill him, he has no choice but to now escape and to leave home and to leave his family and to leave his people and to leave everything he's ever known of anything. And no one should feel bad for him because he brought all of that on himself by being absolutely the worst human being ever. Poor Esau has had it hard enough. The man was born furry like a goat. And his brother is out here taking what he's got. And so Jacob has to leave. And while he's gone, there's one night where this happens. This is in the book of Genesis, chapter 28. We read this. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against, and he laid down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamt of a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven. And he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place. I wasn't even aware of it. But he was also afraid and said, what an awesome place it is. It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven. This is what we got to understand. For reasons that literally no one knows at all. The Apostle Paul ends up writing about this in the book of Romans, and Paul is like, he's just like, shrug emoji, I don't know why. God, from the beginning, chose Jacob. He just did. For whatever reason, he just did. Jacob never had to do any of that. He never had to manipulate his hungry brother, who is clearly not all that bright, into giving up his birthright for a bowl of soup, no matter how great that bowl of soup might have been. He never had to do that. Jacob never had to lie to his father and steal what wasn't his. He never had to do that. The end result was always going to be the patriarchs are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Always. It was never not going to be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because it turns out that's what God wanted. And as it turns out, that's what God was working on. You see, that is what Jacob ends up waking up to. He wakes up to the fact that God is doing stuff. His whole life, as he wants what Esau wants, as he's trying to jockey for position in this world, he is trying to come up with ways that he gets his. And at the end of the day, he never had to do that because God was working on his behalf. The interesting thing, though, was he didn't know that. He didn't believe that. He didn't trust that, which is sort of weird when you think about it, given that his grandfather is Abraham, given that his dad is Isaac. One would imagine that Jacob would not be just shocked that, whoa, there's a God and he's working. God is in this place. Like, Jacob is shocked that God is doing stuff. You would think Jacob would know that already. But he doesn't. And see, what else he didn't have to do? He didn't have to be in this situation. Yeah, it's neat, fine, cool. God has shown him this wonderful miracle. This wonderful miracle of the ladder between, heaven and earth. Jesus ends up during his ministry comparing himself to that. Right? He compares his ministry to the same situation of God working in this world, a bridge between heaven and earth. I mean, this is a beautiful thing. But the only reason Jacob's actually seeing this is because his brother is hunting him. He's being hunted. He's estranged from his family. He's estranged from his home. His sin blew up his life for absolutely no reason. In other words, for Jacob, it's like, man, I want these baseball cards. And I could pay like $2 for them. I could ask my brother. He'll probably give them to me. But you know what I'm going to choose? I'm going to choose stealing. And for Jacob, the consequences of that were dire. That's cool. The consequences were dire. Yeah, we should do that. I should have somebody up on the roof all the time, chucking stuff off. I make a point that I like, and it's like, that's a good idea. But also, now I've lost my place. I don't know where I was at. It's fine. I don't know what the sermon's about. We talking about Jacob? Did we get to the Guy Fieri part yet? You guys didn't think the Guy Fieri thing was nearly as funny as I did. I was giggling my head off as I was writing this. But see, Jacob had no idea that God was working. And because he had not yet woken up to this reality that God is everywhere and God is doing stuff, he thought there was only sinful options. So for you and I, this is where this leads to us. This is where this leads for us. Okay? We have to remember that God is working. You see, we live in a world where it can seem like he's not. It can seem like, man, just, bad guys win all the time. We're like, the easiest way to being successful in this life is lying and cheating and stealing. And that's just the way it is. And those people, can be very easy to think like, well, I've done this and now I win. So what was the problem? And what we have to understand is that when we think like that, all we're really doing is, well, maybe not all we're doing. Maybe that we become successful that way, but there's a side effect to that. Jacob got what he wanted, but his brother was hunting him to death. He could have got what he wanted, and his brother was A-okay with it. And he had a friendship with his brother. Think about, I make the joke, but this is Esau's out hunting stuff. Jacob cooks the stuff. They could have had a beautiful arrangement, a beautiful friendship. This could have been they could have worked perfectly together. Instead, they fought constantly because Jacob decided he wanted to fight constantly. And so, yeah, Jacob wins. Cool. Good for you, Jacob. But the consequence that gets attached to that then is a life of destruction and a relationship with his brother that he could have had that could have been very differently. Could have been very different. For you and I, that's kind of the way this works too. Those people that we looked at lied and cheat and steal, that we look in this world, man, have you ever talked to somebody who's been successful and they lied and cheated their way to get to it? You're not talking to a real happy person. You see, there's a cost to everything. And see, we as Christians are so hung up on well, is somebody going to go to hell? Well, is God's judgment going to rain down on them? We're so focused on sin equals that we don't realize that the Bible teaches that sin destroys our lives. That much of the time that when we sin, there's no consequence later. There's a consequence now. You wrecked your life. Cool, you won the game. Cool, you make a lot of money. Cool, you got that job. Cool, you're where you are. Cool, you got out of doing something. But now there's this. Yeah, I got those baseball cards in my house. Also, I felt guilty enough about it to bring it up 2 years ago. Could have not had that. But see, that's the way that sin works. And so for us, we've got to understand, we always have an option. We as Christians so often have bought into what everybody has bought into, which is that the ends justify the means, right? That if the end is just, or the mean is right, the end is righteous, or what we want at the end of it is important enough that whatever we do to get there, well, it must be okay. But the fact is, that's not the way it works. It's collateral damage to all of it. And the story of Jacob and Esau teaches us what we need to wake up to is that we always have options. There's always an option. There's always a way to be godly in any situation. It may not be the thing we immediately think of, and it may not be immediately the thing that we consider at first, and it may not be the thing that, we want to do because it's not always overly pleasant. but it's always there. God is working in this world, which means we can choose to do things God's way. Always. No matter what. And when we do that, we don't have the collateral damage. We don't have the other things attached to it. Of course, maybe we don't succeed, quote unquote, the way we want to, of course. All right. I mean, like, it worked out for Jacob. It's easy for us to say, well, Jacob, I'm not the shortstop of the Cincinnati Reds, My dreams didn't work out. That's because I'm terrible at all sports, not just baseball. I can barely walk, guys. Somebody's like, man, have you ever ice skated? And I'm like, are you kidding me? You mean, did I ever get on knives attached to shoes and go on frozen water? No. I'm not saying it's always going to work out. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in all of our endeavors, there's always a godly option. And see, here's this great lie we have, is that we can reach a godly end through ungodly means. That's what Jacob was trying to do. He was trying to reach a godly end through ungodly means. And all it really got him was hunted by his brother. You and I cannot get to a godly end through ungodly means. We may think we can, but all we're doing is setting up collateral damage. This morning, we're in our second week of our series called While You Were Sleeping. We're talking about this weird thing where somebody goes to sleep in the Bible and then wakes up and they learn this new thing. And we need to do the same thing as Christians ourselves. We need to wake up and realize that there's other stuff that's going on, that even if we're people of faith, yeah, we're baptized, yeah, we're all this stuff, but there's more things for us to wake up to. This morning, as we talk about Jacob and Esau, there's this really, really important point of God being at work and that always giving us options. We always have an option to be different. We always have an option to be better. And so our second lesson from what we need to wake up to is this. God is always at work in this world, so we can always choose his path to follow instead of a path of sin. God is always at work in this world, so we can always choose his path to follow instead of a path of sin. The musicians are going to come forward. We're going to sing a song. We often have this invitation each and every week to embrace these truths, to embrace this idea. The Bible teaches that when we understand who Christ is and we want to follow him or to repent to be baptized, it sounds like two things. It's really just one. In repentance, we are changing our hearts and souls and minds, saying, I want to do things God's way. In baptism, we are symbolically doing that. We are aligning ourselves with Christ. Just as Christ was buried and raised to a new life, we, in baptism, are buried and raised to a new life, and we, as Christians, align ourselves with him forever. If you've never made a decision, nice warm baptistry, all sorts of folks can do it. Let's talk. If you're already an immersed believer in Christ, you're looking for a perfect church home, this place is not it. But we do serve a perfect God. We want to connect, we want to call, we want to cultivate. When we want to meet new people, we want to share the gospel, we want to grow up while we do it. And we want to be people who, no matter what end we're going towards, we are living God in a godly way, and we're choosing the path of Christ. As we stand,